Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our finale. We're not going to call it final, we'll call it our finale class for the art of parenting. The sixth class, really a fantastic series, and it was such a pleasure and a joy to learn along with you on this journey for the last 5 weeks. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's class, where we're going to be looking at, the road ahead. The road towards Jewish adulthood. And in thinking back to a lot of the different things that we've learned about over the past few weeks in parenting and in raising our children, we really learned quite a bit. And a big theme, I believe that we can say we've learned in the course of the classes is really Judaism's perspective of understanding the role of parents. So let's just review for a bit. What have we learned so far? What have we taken in over the last few classes so we can really understand where we're bringing this all together towards what objective? So in our very first class, we had learned about the idea of focusing on the child's needs, and that in raising our children, it's not about our own personal interests or our own ideas or visions for our children, but rather it's really about seeing our children as, entrusted into our hands by Hashem, and focusing on seeking what is in the best interest of our children, and especially on the idea of parental positioning. This is a very key idea, fundamental idea in Jewish parenting, that the parent is, while we certainly have positive relationship with our children, we're not their friends, and we are their parents, and positioning ourselves in being that parent, because there's only, one mother, one father that they will ever have in their life, and making sure to maintain a sacredness around that role. Different things we spoke about, not sitting in the chair, not using a first name, trying our very best to teach our children about the value and importance of respecting the parental role, not for ourselves, but more because this is really beneficial and healthy for the child. Then we went on into the second class. We had looked at the importance of using both role modeling and proactive parenting when raising our children. I think that one of the key ideas about role modeling is that very often we need to remember that parenting is about working on ourselves, because we create and provide an image for our children about everything, any characteristic, what it means to be a human being, a person. And we're modeling it because they will always remember the image that we, showed them. Just remember the story of Yosef HaTzadik, and how Joseph, what he drew to his mind was the faces of his mother and father. And that really helped him when faced with challenges. And at the same time, though, we also discussed that role modeling has limitations, because you can have many great role models, but it doesn't mean that you'll have the tools to know how to take those ideals and bring it into actual practice into your day-to-day life. And that's why we have the importance of proactive parenting, where as a parent, we actually train our children, training them, giving them the tools, guiding them, coaching them, like molding gently with lots of love and strategies to really help them become the person that they can be. And a key piece to this is teaching children how to maintain self-mastery, because role modeling will help for all the things that come easy. You just need someone to show you an image. If you have the natural talent and the ability, you'll be able to model it. You'll be able to not model it, sorry. You'll be able to go along with what you've been modeled. But anything that it requires you to go beyond your comfort zone requires actual training. And so all of the things that require self-control and self-mastery, because if you recall, there was a text out, Torah teaches us, and we see this, that children are born without self-control. So this is a really key piece for us as parents to focus on with our children in terms of proactive parenting, to train them how to have self-control. The third idea that we had focused on is the importance of fostering a mindset of obligations and responsibility, as opposed to a mindset of rights. I have my rights. You know, you as a parent, you are the one responsible to give me the child, you know, fulfill all my needs. But in the Jewish parenting model, which has great track record, it really does work based on thousands of years of tradition. It's not about that, but rather about raising our children to see themselves as having responsibility because they're rooted in a greater purpose and God-given mission. Now, this was, we had discussed and explored in relation to the idea of parental authority. So, you know, we asked the question, you know, why can't we just tell our kids, well, you got to do this because I said so? Now, the limitations of that is that basically it becomes again back about to me as the parent and the parental, you know, kind of ego, but it's really not about that. And there is value of telling our children, you know, sometimes this is what you got to do without necessarily providing all the explanations. Remember, we spoke about we don't always have to explain everything. Sometimes it has to be because this is what is the right thing to do, or this is what we need to do now, where it's about a bigger picture of authority not coming from me and my ego, but rather from authority coming from our responsibility and a God-given authority. So yes, I as a parent have a responsibility to educate and guide my child, and that's how we can tell that to our children, but that's where the guidance is coming from when we're coming to our children with parental authority. When we're using our parental authority, it's not about me, it's because this is my responsibility in raising, you know, my child on the right path. Now, the last two lessons were also very interesting. We had explored the idea of the importance of nurturing in our children self-esteem, and we had looked at how there's two different elements of self-esteem. And really to develop a person's positive self-worth, they need to have a belief in their intrinsic value that is unconditional, nothing to do with anything that they actually have achieved, just because. And the more children hear this message of, you know, I love you because of who you are, and I see you for your unique way, even though you might be different than me, might be different than everyone else in our family, but there's something special about you. And the more our children hear that message, they come to believe that they have value and have worth just for who they are. And at the same time, the idea of building in our children a feeling of independence and self-efficacy, that they, you know, they're capable, and that these two ideas together create a feeling of self-worth. And this idea that, you know, I'm here, going back to the idea, circling back to that concept of I'm here for a purpose. So that purpose is really important for a child to hear that. And when a child is raised with that idea, this elevates them and lifts them up to really believe in themselves. And when they believe in themselves, this also helps them maintain self-discipline. You know, like we had discussed last week, the concept, as we call in Yiddish, was passt. You know, what's befitting you? You know, you're capable, you have so much potential, and you can be better than this. It lifts the child up. Now, in the last week, we really focused on the power of words and how there really is a right way, an effective way to praise our children or to reprimand them. Both are very important in terms of raising that child on the path that we want them to be on. So both praise and reprimand have important value and important role to play in raising them, but there's the right way to do it. In terms of praising, we had spoken about the importance of not necessarily praising natural talents, which is really not within a child's control. These are things for us to be grateful for. You know, thank God God gave us this ability, but to focus specifically on praising things are within a child's control, because kids want our praise. They want our positive feedback. They want to know that they've pleased us. So the more they hear that we've praised their specific behaviors like putting in effort, behaviors like being kind, things that they like, behaviors like having self-control, those things that they can actually control, then they know that this is more of what I can do. And essentially the praise is a tool to raise them in the right path. At the same time, reprimanding them is also a tool. But it's really important, when we looked at a few texts to ensure that we're never reprimanding a child in a way that will humiliate them, or in a way that comes from our emotions. To circle back to that idea, it's not about us and what we're feeling, right? They need to see that it's really about what we believe is in their best interest. And the best way to do that is to be thoughtful, to take the time to choose our words carefully, never to approach a child out of anger or haste. So, wow, that's a lot. We've really learned a lot of fantastic principles. Now, obviously, this parenting course is not about learning how to deal with each and every type of scenario that we'll deal with and face when raising our children, but it's about identifying the underlying principles that Judaism teaches us, that these principles can apply in a variety of different situations. But one of the key questions that we want to start out with for today, when we're thinking about long-term future, this is all about raising our children towards adulthood. What exactly is our obligation as parents in terms of preparing our children for adult life? So if you have your student workbook, which, as I mentioned before, if you haven't had a chance to purchase it, it's just a great book to have in your bookshelf. So, you can go on Amazon, order it, have it even after the course, and just have it there as a reference to just have, because it's an amazing collection of a variety of texts, from Torah texts to child psychology, that it's just always good to have as reference. So if you have the workbook, and you can see on page 164, we have an exercise asking us the question. In your opinion, and if you don't have the book, just think about this or jot something down beside you. In your opinion, what are the most important, concrete, legislatable parental obligations? So if you were, for example, invited into a task force and they were discussing the topic, in some important division in the government, in law, what would be parental obligations that every parent should be required to have to provide for their children, or to teach their children? What are our obligations to children? What do you think they should be? And just caveat, keywords, concrete. So we're not talking about something that's, abstract. Raise them with positivity. Okay, it's got to be something concrete.
Responsibility, sense of responsibility.
Okay, how would we make that concrete?
They should take responsibility for their action.
Okay.
Answer for what they've done wrong. Even if they're young, they should still answer to you.
So hold them accountable for whatever their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in? Thank you. What do you think should be a legislatable? Means that if people don't do this, the parents will be held accountable. What would you think? Like, this should be the law. The law in this country should be that every parent has to what?
Honey, to keep your child safe.
Okay, make sure they're safe. What else? What would you think would be like the basic, right? In America today, they should know how to cook.
They should know how to feed themselves a nutritious meal.
Good. Okay, have food. Okay, like in America today, there's basic things. You have to make sure your child is safe, otherwise it's called neglect. If you don't provide food, shelter, right? If you abuse your child, that's legislatable. Now, here we're going to compare this to a fascinating text, okay? Where there's a conversation in the Talmud that basically asks this question, okay? Talmud is a book of law. This is in the times of right after the Second Temple. We have, University of Rabbis discussing what are the obligations of parents. So this is text 1.
What page is it? Sorry, what page
on page 165.
Okay.
Lena, do you have it? Do you want to read it?
I have it, yes. A father is obligated to circumcise his son, redeem him if he is a firstborn, teach him Torah, take a wife for him, and teach him a profession. Some say that a father is also obligated to teach his child to swim. Wow, I was actually thinking just exactly about that, teaching your child to swim, because from the book by Mogel, right?
Yeah.
And that quote stuck to me forever and ever, is the one thing we could do for our children is teach them how to swim. Let them just, yeah, survival basically.
Right. Now, this is definitely not what we would have expected necessarily. Like, this is what parental obligation is, but there's a lot for us to learn. A lot for us to learn here in terms of the Judaism's wisdom as to what really are parental obligations. Now, we have 5 things here, okay? Just to explain the second one of redeeming the firstborn, what this basically is referring to, there's a mitzvah that a boy, that the firstborn son, according, like, there's a tradition, they were supposed to be the Kohanim, the priests that would serve in the temple. So basically there's a mitzvah that a firstborn son, a father, basically makes a trade, pays special coins to the Kohen, and then the Kohen is the firstborn son is redeemed, and he no longer has to provide the service in the Bet HaMikdash, and instead the Kohen is the one who basically takes the responsibilities. They kind of like make a trade. So it's a beautiful tradition that's performed at the end of the first month of a child, firstborn son. So these are the obligations. Now, when we're going to categorize them, we can notice that these actually fall into 2 different kinds of categories of responsibilities. The first 3 are religious obligations, okay? And the second 3 are universal obligations. Now, I want us to take a moment and kind of really, analyze these, because really there is symbolism here, as you referenced, Elena, when you're talking about teaching a child to swim. It's not just about teaching the child how to swim, it's about teaching a child how to survive in the real world, and especially and particularly how to survive in unexpected circumstances. We think about the context historically of where this was written. People didn't swim for recreation. Now when you give your kids swimming lessons, it's very often a sport, but that wasn't why children were taught how to swim, back in BCE. It was a mode of survival, because we often find ourselves in a variety of settings where we're in water, either on a boat or near a lake or anything, all different kinds of situations. And knowing how to swim is important, especially if it's unexpected, right? You think you're on a boat, you think it's going to be safe. What happens when it capsizes? You need to know how to swim. So this symbolizes the idea of knowing how to really navigate unexpected situations and to essentially be what we call it now, resilient. To be resilient. This is a key fundamental idea that was identified by the rabbis of the Talmud. We have to make sure that our children know how to swim and have the tools to be able to navigate a variety of unexpected situations. Okay, teaching a profession. So what is this about? This is also about self-sufficiency. That when a child grows up, it's not about, what would have happened if you had all the money in the world and enough money to your children to live off a trust fund for the rest of their life. That's not the Jewish way. Jewish way is that your child knows a profession and is able to sustain themselves. Whatever the profession is, it could be a vocation, it could be a career. It's about making sure that when we're raising our child, when they enter adulthood, they are able to basically manage on their own and take care of themselves. So they're practically self-sufficient. Now let's look at the very first thing, the top of that column. We've been working our way from the bottom up. To find a spouse. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that what you have to do is, go around hunting, Jewish girl or Jewish boy and make matches and make sure you sign them up for J-dates or whatever will be around in 10 or 15 years from now. Really what this is about is, and this is, I think, a really uniquely Jewish concept. I don't think that necessarily you'll find some of these, like some of the other ideas you might find in, okay, this is what we see parents should do. But the idea of finding a spouse is something that's very unique in terms of Jewish model. And I think it really has something very important to teach us about what Jewish parenting is about. And what that is raising a child that is marriageable. So when I'm raising my son or my daughter, I'm thinking about the kinds of husband, father, mother, wife that they will be. And raising them in a way that they have the tools to know how to be that, how to be nurturing, how to be loving, how to live in a family unit. Developing that heart, the social emotional skills, the communication skills, the understanding that, you know, everyone is different, not to judge people, to accept someone else's opinion, to listen, to know how to not take arguments as the end of the world, because those will happen. I'm just giving some examples, but that emotional resilience and most importantly, emotional self-sufficiency. So it's not just that the child is self-sufficient in terms of being able to manage, you know, a variety of, situations they might find themselves in. It's not just about practical financial self-sufficiency and a profession, but also about emotional self-sufficiency. While I'm not going to find a spouse for my child, what I will do is, what I do see as my obligation is to help them find a spouse, to make sure that they are ready for marriage by the time they reach the age of marriage, that they really are prepared for what it means to be in a married family life, and to teach them also what are the things to look for, so that when they have to make a choice of having to choose a spouse, they know what's important. They know what's valued in relationships, and not, for example, some other message that they may hear from the outside world, that what's important may be, you know, looks. How important are really looks? Is it money important? Or is there something deeper? Where are they going to learn that character is the most important thing to look for in a spouse? They're not going to learn that in the outside world. The only place that they're going to learn that is from me and my husband. That's our obligation as parents. So now when we look at this totality of these 6 things, we have an obligation as Jewish parents to raise Jewish children with a rich religious life. And we'll talk more about that soon. And to raise our children in a sense of continuity of tradition, continuity of Torah knowledge, to pass it on to the generation. And also on a universal level, to raise a mensch, that our child is a mensch who is marriageable. Someone else will want to marry our kid and will be happy being married our kid. I think about how, you know, the best nachas would be my future daughter-in-law and son-in-law telling me thank you for raising a mensch. I know how I felt when I married my husband, and how I felt towards my mother-in-law, like, wow, thank you. And all the things that he learned. That's my hope, my dream. God willing, it should come true. For my kids, that's when I know that I did a good job. So that's what we're talking about when we say we want to raise a mensch. It's a beautiful phrase, but what does it mean practically? It means that, God willing, they will know how to sustain a healthy and positive relationship. And the biggest commitment of a relationship that you can ever find is with a spouse. And to teach them also practical skills. They need to know how to be self-sufficient in a profession, or to swim. Such unique and interesting ideas and wise ideas that we have here. And if we go back to our first question that we started out with, where in modern times, there's a plethora of advice out there. You don't need to come to Torah necessarily and say, teach me about parenting. There are so many parenting books out there, so many parenting courses you can take, but there's something unique that only the Torah and Judaism can offer. And what is that? What is that unique, time-tested, track record, thousands of years of generations of Jewish parents raising Jewish children that till today still are connected with Judaism? Where does that come from? The answer is here in this text, by focusing on our parenting on these ideas when raising our children. So we spoke about, what does finding a spouse mean? A child that is emotionally self-sufficient. What does teaching a profession mean? Raising a child that is practically self-sufficient. What does teaching a child to swim mean? it means that they have the skills to deal with the unexpected. Now, there is also an idea of teaching a child moral self-sufficiency, which means that there are certain ethics and values that we want our children to have and to stay with them in adulthood, even after we leave. Remember, we had that classic line from King Solomon, educate a child according to his way so that he will stay with it for his whole life. That means that even after we're not around, we're not there, they have their own house, they have their own life, they move out of the home. Now what? What values will stay with them? Will we raise children who have that moral self-sufficiency? And our text is going to bring us back to something that we looked at in the very first class. So we can look at on page 168, text 3a. So remember, this was Hashem said about Avram, the first Jewish father. I love Abraham because he instructs his children and his household after him to follow the path of God by doing righteousness, charity, and justice. Now, there is an explanation that is brought, a commentary about the words after him. What does it mean that he raises his children and his household after him? There's a commentary, a Rabbi Sofer, who wrote a book, Kitab Sofer, the writings of Sofer. And he explains the following. He instructs his children and his household after him. This means that Abraham's education was such that even after him, even when he was no longer there to instruct his children, they followed the path of God by doing righteousness and justice. They did so not in deference to their father Abraham's wishes, but because they understood that it was the right and just thing to do. Meaning that even when, like, let's say, for example, now, many times our children will do certain things because, okay, I know this is what my parents expect of me. And it's not a bad thing when they're young. It's not, because we're training them. But success means that when they're adults and you're not the one that's there, now they're independent, they still do those same values, but not because of you, because you taught them. You're almost not even a part of the calculation, but rather because now they believe in it. It has become theirs. Now, I want to share something very interesting, a very interesting tradition that we have in Judaism, which is that when a child begins to speak, we teach them some Jewish verses. As soon as they're able to talk, we try, even in their cute little 2-year-old language, try to teach them certain Jewish verses. One of them is Shema Yisrael, and the second one is the phrase Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe Marasha Kilat Yaakov. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Definitely if you have little children in preschool, you know this song. They have a little stuffed Torah, they hug it, and they sing this song of these words. Now, this phrase, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe Marasha Kilat Yaakov, why would this be one of the first words that we train a young Jewish child to repeat? And there's a beautiful lesson that we can learn from this. The phrase means that the Torah, which was given to us, commanded to us from Hashem and taught to Moshe, right, is Morasha. It is your inheritance. It's an inheritance. If I were to call you up one day, or not one day, you're at work, you're busy, and all of a sudden your phone rings, and it's a lawyer at the other end of the line saying, guess what? Long lost relative, left you an inheritance. And whatever, and you're hoping it's going to be something really like an inheritance, right? It's amazing. It's like a gift. The feeling of euphoria that you have when you get that call, unexpected, and it's yours. And it was given to you through your family, right? You got it. That's the way that we present to a young Jewish child what the Torah is. It's your inheritance, and it's a gift that belongs to you personally. It's not your parents. You're not doing the right thing for your parents. You're not Jewish because of your parents. It's the Torah is your inheritance. It's a gift for you personally. So when we speak about what Avram was able to achieve with his children, it was that he was able to achieve that his children saw Avram's values as their own values. They saw it as their gifts and their inheritance. And when we are raising our children and we want them to have their own sense of right and wrong, that's what our objective is. So when we say that we're raising children to be self-sufficient, because that's really the main theme that we're talking about when we look at the Talmud, what the Talmud lists as obligations, it's all about being self-sufficient and independent. Moral self-sufficiency and a sense of moral compass and ethics and values is also a major part of what our objective is as children, in raising our children. Now, in addition to all of this, as Jewish parents, we have, like, if you look at the other side, the other 3 items on the list, these were Jewish obligations, because we're raising human beings. We have dual responsibility towards our children. We're raising a mensch, good human beings, and then at the same time, we're also raising Jewish children. So what is our obligation when it comes to raising Jewish children? And what does it mean specifically to raise a child that is self-sufficient Jewishly? Meaning their Jewish identity is something that is their own, and that when they enter and navigate the larger world, they're able to navigate that larger world proudly as a Jew and with independence, right? Okay, so we're going to look at a text from the Rebbe. It's on page 169. It's text 4. Anyone have the text with them that is comfortable to read? Milana, I think I saw you have the workbook.
Yes, I can read.
Okay, Lena, thank you.
The goal of education is to inculcate children with moral foundations and ironclad principles from which they should never stray. For humankind, these are the universal principles of justice and fairness. For Jews, this also includes absolute belief in God and in the truth and immutability of His Torah. Jewish education starts with instilling within the children the conviction that the Torah is our life and the length of our days. The Torah is synonymous with life. Just as nothing can override the paramount importance of life, nothing can override the paramount importance of the Torah.
So what we see here again is this dual responsibility to raise children who have a more, like, they're a mensch, right? They have, good, strong morals, and they have universal principles of justice and fairness. And at the same time, as Jewish parents, we have an additional obligation, which is a responsibility to nurture and develop proud and practicing Jews who see Torah not just as, okay, it's something beautiful to go to a museum or to go to a class and learn about, but it has nothing to do with my actual life. When we say this phrase, let's say another famous phrase that we say about the Torah is, Torah eitz chayim hi. It is a tree of life, right? If you've ever been in the synagogue when they open and take a Torah out and they sing a song, eitz chayim hi, that the Torah is a source of life. That means that it is practical and relevant to our day-to-day life. So what we want to instill in our children is not that Judaism is something of the past. Oh, it's so interesting history, but it's something that's relevant to us right now. It's part of our identity today. It grounds us, it guides us, it makes us who we are. And that's the key to creating self-sufficiency. Because something that's not relevant, it has no practical applications to me right now. So that I won't have the tools to use it in my day-to-day life. It has nothing to do with my day-to-day life. Now, if we look at the next text, on text 5, we have a really interesting perspective from Alan Dershowitz, right? A very proud Jew who definitely has navigated the secular American world with great confidence. He wears his Jewish identity with pride. But he wrote a book, definitely an interesting read, called The Vanishing American Jew. It's a commentary about American Jewry. And as we are today, not only raising Jewish children in general, but we're raising Jewish children in particular in America, which brings its own challenges. Let's look at some of the research and perspective that he brings. So he says the following: American Jewish life is in danger of disappearing, just as most American Jews have achieved everything we ever wanted. You'd think we're at the pinnacle of success. And yet, American Jewish life is in danger of disappearing. We've achieved acceptance, influence, affluence, equality, as the result of skyrocketing rates of intermarriage and assimilation, as well as the lowest birth rate of any religious or ethnic community in the United States. That's a little plug to have as many children as you feel you can, plus one more. We need Jewish children in the world. The era of enormous Jewish influence on American life may soon be coming to an end. What a shame, because many of the things that made America great was influenced by Judaism. One Harvard study predicts that if current demographic trends continue, the American Jewish community is likely to number less than 1 million, and conceivably as few as 10,000 by the time the United States celebrates its tricentennial in 2076. Other projections suggest that early in the next century, American Jewish life as we know it will be a shadow of its current vibrant self, consisting primarily of isolated pockets of ultra-Orthodox Hasidim. Jews have faced dangers in the past, but this time we may be unprepared to confront the newest threat to our survival as a people, because its principal cause is our own success as individuals. Our long history of victimization has prepared us to defend against those who would destroy us out of hatred. Indeed, our history has forged a Jewish identity far too dependent on persecution and victimization by our enemies. We're going to circle back to this. But today's most serious threat come not from those who would persecute us, but from those who would, without any malice, kill us with kindness by assimilating us, marrying us, and merging us out of respect, out of admiration, and even love. So here we sit as American, raising American children when, something has to shift, because if things stay as the current trend directs, we have a real crisis on our hands. But we, as parents raising the next generation, have the power to change things. So our responsibility as Jewish parents is to nurture and develop proud and practicing Jews. And one of the keys to that is to help our children express their Jewishness in such a way where they see that their Jewish identity is a gift for themselves, and the greatest gift of them fulfilling their ultimate self-actualization. Because who they are is they're Jewish. And basically, in order to achieve ultimate self-actualization, which was one of the higher up levels, if you recall in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is self-actualization. And for Jewish children, developing Jewish self-sufficiency, which is not only about identity, and we'll get to that shortly, we need to make sure that we're looking at their Jewish needs. Now, it happens to be that I'm often in a position or a situation where I encounter, and recently I had such a situation where I met someone who happened to, they happened to be Jewish, and this is how they described it. I am Jewish, but I never really had a chance to explore, literally this week, a conversation with someone that I met. Never had a chance to explore this side of my identity. People always tell me, you're so Jewish. I'm not really sure what they mean when they're telling me that. And I happen to always have Jewish friends, but other than that, never really, and essentially she wasn't raised with that at home. So beyond the identity, what did that mean further that was lacking? And she said, this is something that I'm really interested in as adults in finding more about. But she's young, she's busy, she's going to get caught up with her career, with her personal life. When will she find that time? But this is a gift that we can give our children now when they're in our homes, and we can provide that with that. Now, as we saw, right, we had that our present day enemy is not through negative pressure, but rather through the positive attraction of the secular world. So let's take a moment to ask ourselves this question. What are some best practices that we can implement in our quest to raise?
Honey, I'm sorry. Go back to the other slide. I didn't get a chance to finish reading it.
Sure. Okay. This was from Alan Dershowitz's text from The Vanishing American Jew. So let's think now. We understand that this is serious and it's important, and we need to make sure that our children are raised, with that really deep strength of Jewish identity. Now, if you'll notice, one of the things that Alan Dershowitz identified as a great risk is intermarriage. That basically, you know, sometimes in many cultures it's almost a joke, you know, Jewish boys make the best husbands, so marry Jewish boys, right? Have you ever heard that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's what he's referring to, that idea of killing them with kindness and unintentionally coming from a place of love and respect for Jewish people. Through intermarriage, we can lose, and we are losing, you know, many generations of the next generations of Jewish children. So how do you really ensure that a Jewish boy or a Jewish girl, and this is especially relevant to boys, because the Jewish girls, they'll still have Jewish children, but regardless, it's still important for girls, because even a Jewish girl, you know, to really have a rich Jewish home, it does require 2 Jewish parents. It makes it, you know, it's exceptional when it happens otherwise. It does happen. I know cases of it, but it's exceptional. And it's really unique to the credit of the father that really invests in creating a Jewish home for his Jewish children, even when he himself is not. But how do you really raise a child that will say, you know what, I want to marry someone that is Jewish. I want to have a Jewish home. How do we ensure that there will be that continuity? The child needs to have a certain really strong commitment that's like non-negotiable. And it cannot be, very often I've heard parents say, well, I made sure to marry Jewish because my parents told me that they would kill me if I came home with a non-Jewish boyfriend or girlfriend. That's not the way today's generation is going to work, right? It needs to be something that's their own. It's their own inheritance, that they believe it for themselves. So what are best practices that we can implement in our quest to raise proud and self-sufficient Jews? They want this for their children and for their family because this is what they want. They're independent. Let's just shoot out some answers. What do you guys think is the key?
Making celebrations special.
Yeah, making it fun, focusing on the celebrations. Good. Thank you, Milana.
Being Jewish and being proud and happy about it, sharing it with everyone around.
So showing your kids that you are proud and modeling that, you know, proud and in a public way. Is that what you meant?
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else want to share another one? I'm surprised nobody said give your kids Jewish education. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I mean, obviously we wouldn't be here if we weren't.
Right,
but
I know. That was a joke.
I think I think other people, it's similar to what other people said, but I think when you go to shul with them, you know, and they're part of a community and they see that there's people in your community who, you know, there's different kinds of people in your Jewish community, but they see that we're all together, you know, in that space and sharing that experience. I think that's important.
Thank you, Dan. So what I'm hearing you describe are 2 aspects that you touched on. One is providing them with models, and diverse models, of Jews who actually live this way. So this touches on the idea that we spoke about, the importance of role modeling, right? As well as you're referring to something else, which is actual practice, you know, like bringing it into action. So remember when we spoke about the difference between role modeling and proactive parenting, that we need both. So yes, our children need us to role model how we're proud to be Jewish, how we'll go out and proudly tell our coworkers that we're Jewish, and we'll talk about, you know, what it means to be a Jew in today's world in a very, you know, in a public way. They need to see practicing Jews, but they also need us to actually take them to shul and to synagogue. They need the action, because without training them, right, and bringing it down into practice, it becomes just theory. It's not grounded in habits. So
also something I wanted to add that I actually learned from one of the texts after the lessons was not to talk badly about other Jews. Respect, basically, especially in front of other kids. I mean, you know, there was a text talking about a boy who was raised in a Jewish home, but his parents always talked badly about the rabbi. So when he brought his significant other, future girlfriend home, wife home or something, he said, why would I want to be with somebody Jewish when you guys always talk so poorly about the rabbi who's supposed to be the respected guy? So that was a lesson for me, big lesson.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true.
We need to, we need to unite and we need to respect each other.
Right. Because if we focusing so much on how, well, like there's Jews like this and Jews like that, then why would I want to be part of that people when there's so many, right? And they hear the negative. Very, very important and true point. Thank you for sharing that, Lena. So now we're going to look at text 6, where we see something very interesting. And this is a very common theme that we happen to be looking at one particular text, but there's a lot of different texts about this around raising children. So in text 6, this is on page 174, we see here instructions for how to raise a Jewish child. Okay? So it says, when a child no longer clings to his mother, we teach him. I always find the language of these texts just so, cute, or the language is so interesting. When a child no longer clings to his mother, we teach him to observe the mitzvah of sukkah, be able to sit in a sukkah. When he is capable of shaking the 4 species, the lulav and etrog, we train him to take the lulav. When he is capable of dressing himself, we give him tzitzit to wear. As soon as he knows how to speak, his father teaches him to say the Shema. So what do we get out of this text? What are we noticing here? What is it giving us? A model of what idea? There's a few different aspects here that are very interesting. So in education, one of the big topics we talk a lot about is developmentally appropriate, age appropriate. There's a right age for everything. In Judaism, the same thing. There's a right age when a child should be introduced, and this is the other really interesting part here, to Jewish practice. And when we're raising young children, we don't begin with ideas first. We begin with practice, and we begin with, keyword, habits, actions. And the way, if we look at the text, how did, and this comes from, how does the Torah tell us that we should know when a child it's age appropriate, that they're ready? Very simple. When he is capable of it, when the child is physically capable of holding a lulav, when a child is a baby and you can't give them a lulav, don't give it to them. Whatever age it is that they're capable of holding it, you give them a lulav. Whatever age they're capable of taking a coin and putting it into pushka, you give them a coin and you teach them this is charity. At whatever age they're capable to say the words, their language is developed enough that they can say the Shema prayer, you teach them to say the Shema prayer. At whatever age they're capable to, begin to wear tzitzit, they begin to wear it. My son just had an upsharon. It's amazing, thank God. Within a few months, he went from never wanting anything on his head. If his kippah is off, he goes back to go find it. And all you might have to do is go like that to him, and he'll go run to get it. And he's excited and he's proud. Now, what's the beauty and brilliance behind this? If you remember, if you have little kids, then you know you're living this, but if your kids are a little bit older, you remember there was an age where everything was sama. I want to do it by myself. And there was a sense of pride of being able to achieve something. Judaism is telling us, capture that moment when they feel like now I am capable, and they're going to be so proud and excited right away. Don't start with big speeches. Capture that feeling of pride and show them how they can do it. And it's easy. Look, you can wear your kippah, you can do it. And they feel like, yay! And that's how it becomes a habit. Look, you can put a penny in the pushka and we clap and sing, you did a mitzvah. They can do it. So as soon as they can be even within their reach to become self-sufficient, make them self-sufficient. It doesn't have to be, very complicated. So wise in the simplicity. And then the Rashi, which is a commentary from medieval times, one of the most fundamental commentaries on Torah, he adds to this, he says, it was text 7 on page 172, the purpose of education is to habituate children to certain behaviors so that when they grow up, it has already become second nature. So here we have it. The idea is that basically we want to raise our children in such a way that they can be independent. What does that mean? That they create habits so that when they are adults, this becomes their own. They want the traditions. They want to do it because it has become a habit. Now, many times in modern parenting, there's a lot of focus on explaining, understanding. But what's interesting, when we observe and take a step back for a second, we see that from Jewish point of view, actually, it seems to be telling us to begin first by training behaviors and habits. Now, we're going to compare this to other things that we do obviously focus on a lot with our kids. What are some of the basic habits we teach all of our children? Brush your teeth. Clean up after yourself. Say please. Say thank you. While we're going to maybe explain to our child, yes, if you don't brush your teeth, then you're going to get cavities. But that's not really the main reason. It's like, this is what we're doing. As soon as the child is capable of brushing their teeth, we train them, right? There is value and importance in training. And the same is true about Jewish habits. To train our children from a young age, and at an age when they're excited and it's positive, what Jewish habits mean and what does it mean to be a practicing Jew. Now, this can mean different things. It could mean that they learn that on holidays, this is how we celebrate holidays. Or it means that we say a synagogue is a place that Jewish people go to, okay? Or on Saturdays, Jewish people light Shabbat candles. Whatever the tradition is, we just want to train them so they have these habits. And habits, it's fascinating. There's been a lot of research that's been done now about the importance of habits in creating mindsets. Every single one of the Jewish traditions have an associated positive mindset that goes along with it. Take the habit of giving a coin in charity every day. What happens to a person when they give a coin to charity every day? This habit is linked to the mindset about thinking about other people and recognizing that my money is not all for me to use for my own materialistic desires, but rather money is a tool to help make the world a better place. A habit of making a blessing before we eat. That's a tool to train us to be mindful about what we are eating before we eat it. Every Jewish tradition has a mindset that goes behind it. So it's not that we're trying to train habits because we just want to raise children that have these habits down pat. It's because each of these habits are linked to a certain type of a value or a characteristic that we want to inculcate and raise in our children. Now, here we have a little Jew in training, just like she's learning how to brush her teeth. We also want to raise our children with positive Jewish behaviors. Now, the next idea that we have is similar to the idea that you were describing before, I believe, Lena, about the importance of children seeing that you are proud to be Jewish and feeling and communicating the feeling that you hit the jackpot. When you're Jewish, the fact that you're born Jewish and you're part of this nation, it's like that call that you get and you find out you inherited, $6 billion or more, because it's priceless. You really hit the jackpot. And being Jewish and these celebrations, right, like Hanukkah scene, like you were talking about, Milana, they're awesome, Sometimes I hear kids describing like how Hanukkah is the most amazing holiday ever, and I'm thinking, yes, Jewish parenting at its best. Now, I want to be clear, while yes, obviously, like we mentioned before, really important for us to, key way for us to raise, Jewish children is by giving them a Jewish education and sending them to Jewish school. But it's really important for us to understand that a Jewish school is limited in what it can provide a child. Because what a Jewish school does not provide is a model for home. That's the only thing that Jewish parents can do at home. So what a Jewish home looks like, what Jewish family looks like, what Jewish tradition look like at home can only be given by parents at home. And also real role models of what your values are and how you live and practice as a Jew. That's the image, the face, just like Joseph, he saw the face of his parents. That's what will stay with children. So Jewish education absolutely gives children that heads up, like by a bajillion. miles ahead than lacking the Jewish education. But it really is about the partnership together between what parents are giving the children at home and also what education they're getting in school. This feeling of you hit the jackpot, and this feeling of closeness and gathering around, for example, the image of the Hanukkah candles, that comes from home. And when we focus with our children on them hearing about the beauty of being Jewish and how special it is, and focusing on, like the story that you described, on focusing on what unites us as Jews, and that recognizing that what unites us as Jews, it's not just the shared history, but it's also that we have, God has a special love for us as a nation, and he's given us a special role to play, a mission, to be a light into the nations, to really be a mensch, to spread, godliness and goodness throughout the world. When children feel this, like, wow, I've been chosen for something very special, and being Jewish is special. Really, this is a really key aspect that basically lifts children above. Now, it's important to recognize, like, why is this true? Okay, this sounds very nice, but why? How do we know that this is really true? So we're going to look at text 8. We have a text here from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Always has very brilliant things to say. And he says the following, and I've seen this, I've observed this as an educator myself in looking at different schools of thought in Jewish education. So this is what Rabbi Sachs says. He says, I have read many works of post-Holocaust Jewish theology, and they all ask the same question. They ask what unites us, the Jewish people today, with all our divisiveness and arguments. And in them, I read the same answer. What unites us as Jewish people today is memories of the Holocaust, fears of anti-Semitism. What unites us as a people is that other people hate us. Just want that to resonate for a second. What that would feel like for a child to be raised with this message. And then Rabbi Sachs continues, the Rebbe taught us the opposite message. What unites us, he taught, is not that other people don't like us, but that God loves us. That every one of us is a fragment of the divine presence, and together we are the physical presence of God on earth. Surely that message, spiritual, mystical as it is so much more powerful, so much more noble, so much more benign than the alternative. Especially as children being raised today in American world, where society, with all the developments that have been happening over the last few years, where anti-Semitism has become a much more prevalent in the consciousness of American Jews and of Jewish children. They know about it in a way that I remember growing up as a child in America. To me, it was much more far removed than, I would hear the stories from my grandmother, but it felt far removed. But my children growing up today are much more aware of it than I was. That being said, we have to be careful and mindful of how much we talk about it at home, how much our children hear us focusing on that idea, and how much we discuss it. And yes, obviously as adults, we often do find ourselves discussing it because it's a real dilemma. But we have to be careful of how much of it we're doing with our children around, because that message, it doesn't inspire a child to say, yes, I want to continue to be part of this nation. But rather, there's another message that it's more important for us, the children, to hear lots of this, as much as they will hear about anti-Semitism. There's only so much, we can control. They will hear it. It's a reality. They have to know it because they have to be prepared. But in order to inoculate our children to really navigate that world that they will face outside, we must make sure that they're drenched and drowning in a different message of positivity about the beauty of Judaism. This is the jackpot. This is the best inheritance that you can ever get. Hashem loves us. He has chosen you to be part of this special nation, and he has a special mission for us to achieve. That's why he gave us the Torah as a gift to bring this wisdom to the rest of the world. Even to bring to our children's attention the fact that, the American principles of freedom of rights, where does it come from? The importance of valuing humanity. Where did it come from? The importance of protecting the rights of children. Where did it come from? It did not come from Western civilization. It came from Judaic texts that inspired modern Western civilization. That's such a interesting and inspiring idea. Now, just a story that I want to share around this idea, that there was during the when many immigrants came to America in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. At that time, being a Jew in America was quite difficult because it was almost impossible to maintain a job if you kept Shabbos. Basically, if you were an immigrant, you were dependent. There was no concept of religious rights, that as you have nowadays, where employers have a sense of respect and responsibility to honor the religion of their employees. If you got a job, you needed the job because otherwise there would be no food on the table. You would find a job maybe in a factory somewhere, and factories ran 7 days a week. And if you did not show up on Saturday, that's it. Sunday morning, you did not have a job. So this was a real challenge for many Jews who immigrated to America during that time. Majority of Jews during that time, sadly and understandably, couldn't deal with it. And this is how many American Jews became very assimilated, because they couldn't do it. So while they were religious, if you've ever been to the Lower East Side and visited the tenement house, you can see a lot of that history there, where basically it was impossible for them to sustain it. And why many were successful, that's why they created their own sweatshops in the tenements, to try to create their own independence, to be able to maintain their Shabbos. But for many, it was very difficult. So there's a story that is told of two Jews that came to America around the same time. They were both religious, both very committed to Shabbos, and raised families. Years later, they met up, two older Jews, and one, very sadly turns to his friend and says, "Oh, remember, the good old days back in the old world, how we grew up, and our lives changed so much when we came to America. How are your children doing?" And basically one says, "My children basically have left Judaism." And the other one says, "And what about you?" "My children," and he shared how, the nachas that he has, his children have continued Judaism. What was the difference? And really what the difference was many years before, how each of them handled the stress of this situation of having to basically, deal with the financial challenges. Now, both of these two friends, they never worked on Shabbos. So they were constantly out of work, constantly. They were held strong, like Shabbos is the most important thing. And no matter what, like they would not go to work on Shabbos. Every week, and they would have to find a new job. They would get their pink slip on Sunday. Monday, they're back trying to, back on the job market. And they went through this cycle for years. So basically, what happened was that this one father, he, every time Shabbos would come, he would walk into the house and he already knew what to expect. He would say, like Friday night already, he's like already sitting, as he's making the kiddush, as his wife is lighting the candles, he's like already thinking, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I'm gonna be out of a job, and I'm gonna have to go back on. I know I'm gonna be fired. I'm gonna get that pink slip, and I'm gonna have to find a new job. And his whole Shabbos he was stressed, and the kids saw him while there was Shabbos, and there was a Shabbat dinner, everything. They knew that this, like, the burden of it, they felt the burden. Whereas the other Jew, he would come home and he would dance, it's Shabbos. And in fact, the way the story goes, and there's a few different versions of it because it happened to many people, but this one particular story that really resonated with me, was so beautiful, was this Jew that every year on Sukkot, when he would build his sukkah, he would take the pink slips that he had collected over the whole entire year, and that would be the wallpaper. And he would line his sukkah in it to make it look beautiful and pink, and he would dance in it over Sukkot and say, "Hashem, look at this beautiful Shabbos that I did for you." And his kids grew up, they saw his sacrifice and they knew it wasn't easy. And yes, the reality is that there is anti-Semitism in the world, and being Jewish does have challenges. You can't marry every person that if you want to have a Jewish family, or you might not be able to eat everything that you have. But it's worth it because it's beautiful, right? Responsibility, privilege and responsibility work together. So that joy, and that's why his children continued it. They said, yeah, all right. And they looked back at his dad with pride. They were grateful when they didn't have to do that anymore, but they wanted to give that beauty and joy over to their children. And that's the same thing with our kids. We want to focus when educating our children on the idea that, you know, we're so lucky to be Jewish. As, you know, they're in the Siddur. If we look at text 11, there's a prayer where we're saying, and this just describes the idea. We're saying, Hashem, we are your nation, the people of your covenant, the children of Abraham, your beloved, to whom you swore on Mount Moriah, the descendants of Isaac, his only son, who was bound upon the altar, the community of Jacob, your firstborn, whose name you called Israel and Yeshurun, because of your love for him and your delight in him. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to thank, praise, and glorify you, to bless, to sanctify, and to offer praise and thanksgiving to your name. Fortunate are we, how good is our portion, how pleasant is our lot, how beautiful our heritage. This is the theme, the energy, the idea which we want to give over to our children. And when children hear this throughout their childhood, when they have to go out into the wider world and face, you know, whatever challenges may come their way, it's like, but this is awesome, this is the best thing, I'm so lucky, right? They're really strengthened and able to be self-sufficient Jews. Lena, I want to ask you if you can take a minute to read text 10. Just a beautiful description by author Herman Wouk. Not someone who you would particularly expect to be very religious, but he describes he was traditional and how his family celebrated Shabbat.
Leaving the gloomy theater, the littered coffee cups, the jumbled scared up scripts, the haggard actors, the shouting stagehands, the bedeviled director, the knuckle-knowing producer, the clattering typewriter, and the dense tobacco smoke and backstage dust. I've come home. It has been a startling change, very like a brief return from the wars. My wife and my boys, whose existence I've almost forgotten in the anxious shoring up of the tottering ruin, are waiting for me, gay, dressed in holiday clothes, and looking to me marvelously attractive. We have sat down to a splendid dinner at a table graced with flowers and the old Sabbath symbols, the burning candles, the twisted loaves, the stuffed fish, and my grandfather's silver goblet brimming with wine. I have blessed my boys with the ancient blessing. We have sung the pleasantly syncopated Sabbath table hymn. The Tov has little to do with tottering ruins. My wife and I have caught up with our week's conversation. The boys, knowing that the Sabbath is the occasion for asking questions, have asked them. The Bible, the encyclopedia, the atlas have piled up on the table. We talk of Judaism, and there are the usual impossible boys' queries about God, which my wife and I field clumsily, but as well as we can. For me, it's a retreat into restorative magic. Saturday has passed in much the same manner. The boys are at home in the synagogue, and they like it. They like even more the assured presence of their parents. In the weekday press schooling, household chores, and work, and especially in the play-producing time, it often happens that they see little of us. On the Sabbath, we're always here, and they know it. They know, too, that I'm not working and that my wife is at her ease. It is their day. My producer one Saturday night said to me, I don't envy you your religion, but I envy you your Sabbath.
Really beautiful description of how Shabbos can be for a child growing up in this environment, the feeling of connection, a feeling of, Jewish connection, family connection, really helps cultivate and instill in a child this Jewish, real Jewish pride. But again, it's rooted in actual practice, in something that's not a theoretical idea, but in a tradition that fills the home. Now, if we think back to some of the earlier objectives that we had discussed in the beginning of the class that the Talmud outlined about preparing a child for being in a family, Shabbos is a key time for that, to really focus on the family unit and to focus on the social emotional development of each member of the family and build those connections, and to focus also on the spiritual development. So that this, like Shabbos, like there's a phrase that says, as much as the Jews kept Shabbos, Shabbos kept the Jews. You know, what ensures Jewish continuity, that there will be Jewish homes afterwards for generations? It's that time. It's time together, sacred time where there's nothing else, no distraction. We're just fully present with our children. And that's when Jewish self-sufficiency is nurtured. That's the petri dish of it. And it's such an important and sacred time. Especially nowadays, I have to say that I feel like I've rediscovered Shabbos in a whole new level since we started quarantine. You know, because I guess when there really is this like blurring of all the days together, and suddenly you have this oasis, and also when we become so much more dependent on technology, when you truly, you know, disconnect and to take those 24 hours, it's really amazing for ourselves and for the children. Now we're going to there's one other idea that I wanted to briefly touch on, and that is that in Judaism, there is a lot of talk about the difference of the roles in raising children between the father and the mother. Now, to be clear, really, a child needs both of these ideas. It doesn't necessarily have to be coming only from the father, only from the mother. You know, like nowadays we have dads that, you know, that do traditionally mother roles and vice versa. So it's just a concept that teaches us that a child needs two approaches to really maintain a strong connection to Judaism. So one is a sense of training, of habits, and intellectual training, of Torah study, of understanding, because children do need to understand. It's not only about the habits. I know we spoke a lot about the habits today, but obviously children need the knowledge, and they need to understand the whys behind that. Like the training of habits is more when they're young, but as they get older, right, and as they become more mature and more sophisticated, when they hit elementary school age, they really have questions and they want to understand. So that's seen as more the father role. But then there's another role, but again, it's not limited to specifically mother-father. It's more, let's say, masculine, feminine. And then there's the feminine role, which is that it's not only enough to have the traditions being taught or the intellectual understanding or the moral, like these are what ethics are, but there's also a maternal role, which is where a child learns a flavor, the scent, the warmth of the mitzvot, the beauty of it, feeling that the Torah is something that is alive, and that both of these together are very important, that a child gets both aspects in their upbringing when they're being raised at home. This is the key piece that children can get only from their parents at home. Now, let's talk now, and let's kind of move towards, okay, the objective here is adulthood. Now, what happens when we spoke about all these beautiful ideas. Now, our aim is to raise our child to be independent. How do we make this transition to adulthood? Now, when our children are very young, our focus is on these ideas, that we insist on respectful behavior, we set high standards and goals, we teach the value of accepting authority, you know, we cultivate on all of these ideas. But as children move up, once they, you know, start to reach age 10, 11, 12, definitely by the time they hit bar mitzvah age and beyond, our focus needs to shift a little bit, especially once they become teenagers. If you have teens or you know teens, you know this, that while yes, you still need to expect all these other things, but it can no longer be from a perspective of I'm the parent and you have to because you know I'm the parent and this is what we need to do. It's very different, which is why firstly it's important for us to acknowledge and recognize that when our children are young, this is the time to train them. If we wake up when they're 10, 11 years old to start teaching them what it means to be respectful and how to speak respectfully to a parent, it's very late. It's very late. It's possible, it can be done, but it's very late. We want to start and train them when they're small, because once they get to the older ages, we need to transition to a different model of how we're raising them, because our objective is to slowly withdraw our authority, because we don't want our children again to be doing these things because we're there. If everything is dependent on their fear or their sense of like, you know, I'm going to get in trouble or my parents will be disappointed in me and that's why I must do it, then they're not able to be self-sufficient. So we slowly, gradually begin to withdraw our authority and start to focus more on the fact that all human beings have the freedom of choice. Allow them to learn from their mistakes. Now, I'm not saying that younger children also don't get choices. They do, but it's not necessarily the real focus or emphasis in terms of how you interact and use your authority in your relationship with them. So the older they get, you slowly start to withdraw your authority and focus more on helping them learn how to make their own choices correctly and to build a more a respectful relationship where it's coming from their own sense of respect, because by this point you've already established yourself as someone who's wise, somebody who has life experience, someone who loves them and accepts them unconditionally just for who they are. Now this can actually be very difficult. It's really hard to know when to hold our tongue, but this is key. And this is one of the last texts that we're going to look at. This is text 13, written by Rabbi Eliezer Papo. And he writes, "There are times when parents have to act as if they cannot hear and cannot see, times when they must yield to the wishes of their child. This is a fundamental rule for those who wish to do right by themselves and by their children." And this is particularly referring to children who are older, because at that stage, sometimes we need to know, okay, now it's time for us to step back a little bit. Now, children, well, one of the key pieces to this is to be there for them, to listen to them, and to maybe offer suggestions or ask really good questions. Like, for example, so tell me why you were thinking that that would be a good idea. What are your plans? Like, what would happen if? Ask the questions rather than lecturing, rather than telling them, because we want to kind of help guide their own thinking. And sometimes, actually, my kids have surprised me and actually helped me rethink my own thinking, pointed something out that I hadn't thought about because they're already mature. We're talking about older kids, and able to look at things in a different way. And at that point, you're really, kind of like helping them transition towards adulthood, where you're still there, you're still their parent, you're still, the authority figure, but it's a gradual, a gradual release. Or telling them, here's something I want you to think about. Why don't you think about that? And we're going to continue this conversation, tomorrow. But this is not the way that you would speak necessarily to a young child. They need to be at a certain level, a place of maturity to really know how to execute and use their freedom of choice effectively. And that's a goal that you get there. And then from there, they're gradually able to get to the place of total independence. Now, let's wrap up a little bit, okay? We've been talking about, kind of like thinking about what are the underlying principles. Like we said, we're not able to think about every single scenario in parenting, but Judaism offers us specific underlying principles. And here are the 3 underlying principles that we would identify from everything that we would learn to pull it all together. Number 1, that effective Jewish parenting and an effective parenting moment, meaning like when you did it, when you can be like, okay, I did this, wow, that was good. And it can be hard, right? There's always going to be, for us, as we spoke last time as parents, it's also a process, and there are going to be successes, and there might be times when it doesn't work out the way we want it. And we can feel this guilt, like, I really should have done that better, or I need to be doing more. But we have a goal, and this is what we're working towards. We're all working on ourselves to be better parents and to really be there for our children. But an effective parenting moment is part of it's a thought out interaction that is part of a larger plan. So for example, when we speak to our child, when we have a conversation, when we're giving them the praise or we're giving them the rebuke, or we're even as something as simple as having a Shabbos dinner, it's all part of a larger plan of we're trying to raise our child on the road to Jewish adulthood. And we're thoughtful about it. We're thinking about it. And this larger plan is geared towards achieving long-term results. So it's not about this moment, this situation. So if you recall, in the very first class, we had 2 scenarios. It was Your child is having a tantrum in the supermarket. What do you do? The other scenario was your child wants to leave the house dressed totally not socially appropriate. What do you do? And there wasn't a specific right or wrong way. Remember, we had different, ways to deal with that. Because the key in any situation is thinking about what is the long-term objective that I'm trying to achieve in this moment. And based on that, you can figure out the right thing, especially and most importantly, when the plan considers our children's benefit exclusively. When it's not about me, what I want or I need in this situation, but about me thinking about my child and their unique mission in this world and what will be in their best interest. When we put these three ideas together, we have here a model for principles for Jewish parenting that can really help us navigate a variety of situations. Now, here's a cute question to think about. We're hearing all of these ideas. It sounds beautiful. We're excited. We're inspired. But how are we going to maintain this motivation? We're about to go into the summer, classes and courses ending. How will we stay committed? So I would just want a final volunteer for text 14. Really cute narrative. Would you sell one of your kids for $100 million?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Be honest. Imagine your little Ben didn't burp or fart or throw up when your boss came over, or think flushing the toilet was a mom's job, but sat quietly with other Benjamins in piles of crisp, neatly organized rows, ready to be enjoyed. No talking back, no wanting to play at 6 a.m. after drunken date night, no asking for homework help after your long day at work. Food expenses, tuition and summer camp payments, babysitting fees, gone, gone, and gone. It takes 9 months and change to create a kid. It takes a lifetime, if you're lucky, to earn even a small fraction of 1 million. And most die trying, holding a bag full of regrets and souped up LinkedIn profile. Surely few, if any, would say they accept this over. An unscientific poll of several of my friends uncovered no takers. One of my friends, James Twitcher, commented, "I will sell a leg or an arm or have a lobotomy. I would do anything to keep them free. I would be a slave on a ship. I would be thrown in prison. I would pray all day. I'll do anything rather than have my kids taken away. I would be beaten to a pulp. I would take
Very
drugs.
Descriptive.
I would take cyanide. Nothing would take them from my side. My kids were given to me. It's been my honor since birth. Since no one would make this straight, we must all value our kids much more than 1 million. Yet very few of us act that way. What decisions would you make differently if you truly valued your children more than 1 million?
So we can take a moment and just think of this idea and think about this, over the coming days. What would you do differently if you truly value your children more than $100 million? There's this old little joke about a little boy that goes over to his dad with like a fistful of change. He goes over to him and says, how much do you get paid an hour? And his dad, whatever, tells him a number. And then he comes back with a fistful of, singles and some change. And he says, "Here, Dad, can I make an appointment and buy an hour of your time?" And, we all kind of can get, caught up in the rote of parenting, certain routines and, certain habits. And sometimes we need to take a moment to stop and think, hold on a second. I only have so much time with them. My mother-in-law would always remind me, like when all the kids are in the house living under one roof, it's a short amount of time. It passes faster than you think. So this period of time when our children are young and they're living with us, it's precious and it passes very quickly. So our children are our most precious, even more precious than $100 million. There is no price. What would we do differently if we looked at them in that way and we looked at this time? And sometimes it means making certain hard decisions. Sometimes it means changing certain habits. We all carry around a certain parental guilt that we feel, if only I'm not doing enough. Some of that guilt is misplaced. Some of it is, we're overthinking things. And really our children are capable of being independent. They don't need us to be there every single day. They don't need us to be, handing them, cookies and milk the second they walk in the door. It's not necessarily what they need. We haven't discussed those things. What our children need is other stuff. That's really important. So what would we do differently? How would we take that guilt and actually do something with it, right? What would we do? And for every person, it's something different. Maybe it would be working on, a way that we speak to our children. Maybe it would be changing a routine in the house. Maybe it would be changing the way we celebrate Shabbat or things like that. But it's just some good food for thought. And the last exercise that we have, we've got a lot of interesting exercises, is to select one area of Jewish practice that you'll focus on, and where you're going to try to increase your passion and excitement for it. Because as we said, kids see your excitement and passion for whatever it is. So whatever mitzvah you're excited about, like that story of that dad, he loved Shabbos. He was dancing, even though it meant that he was broke on a regular basis, but he loved it. And he gave that over to his kids. So thinking about a Jewish practice that you really want to instill in that beauty, to your children. I just want to conclude with one final, text, a blessing. As Jewish parents, we strive and dream for nachas from our children, to see them grow up and, God willing, to walk them to the chuppah, to establish their own Jewish families, to see them successful, independent, to see them raise their own families, to see them follow a path of goodness and kindness, good deeds, and to see them wise, taking the wisdom of the Torah and bringing it into their lives, in burning in their hearts, and with passion. And there's a blessing that we give to our children. It's a traditional Jewish blessing that was given to all children on, before Yom Kippur, and many actually have a custom to recite this blessing on Friday nights before Kiddush. It's on page 183, and it says, "Blessing for children." So this is our blessing for our kids. For a son, may God help you be like Ephraim and Menashe. May God help you be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. May God bless you and guard you. May God shine his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. May God turn his countenance towards you and give you peace. So my blessing to all of us is that we should merit to see this blessing fulfilled in our children, and we should have only nachas, and Hashem should grant us the wisdom, the patience, the strength to raise our children in the right path, just like Avram, where he was able to raise his children in a way that they continued after him and stayed in his path. We should be able to do the same.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Hadi.
Thank you. I just want to say it's really been a pleasure. You've been really active participants. I couldn't have asked for better, co-partners in learning together. And I just really appreciate your, participation and just really helping make the class happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, honey.
For doing this, for taking your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
Honey. Diplomas
you,
and
Tanya.
certificates to be mailed out to everyone.
More learning. We'll take more learning.
Yes. That's a very important part of parenting, is recognizing we always need to be learning, and being here. It's the first step. Is just always, being in that state of growth. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.